to an attic next door. He said he got a good look at just one of the shooters. He said he was young, probably in his 20s, and dressed casually. The three gunmen who were said to have been inside Bataclan are all dead, as Fox reports this hour. We don't know if the authorities killed them or how they died. We don't know if a grenade went off as they were standing there. We don't know how they died. We know only that they are dead and that 118 people at least are confirmed there with them. As all of this is happening, after outside the stadium or inside the stadium, they have heard those three gigantic explosions. We now know 2 suicide bombers and another planted bomb, according to authorities. After that, and this wild shooting inside the cafe, described to us just a short time ago by Sean O'Hare, series of weapons, gunfire after gunfire. We know there were masks now from the people who were in there at the time or out on the street. We know that the shooting went on and on, that more than a dozen people were killed there. And as all of this had just happened, and before the explosions inside Bataclan, inside that concert venue, the president of France came to the microphones before the meeting with his cabinet to tell the country it's ongoing. We're closing the borders. The French president, François Hollande, as it happened.
State of emergency has been called, will be called. Some places will be closed, roads will be closed.
Dans toute l'île de France. L'état d'urgence, lui, sera proclamé sur l'ensemble du territoire.
The state of emergency will be applied to the whole French territory. I've also decided to close the borders.
Et en même temps que ceux qui auraient pu commettre les crimes qui sont
to make sure that those who've committed these crimes can be stopped if they are trying to leave the territory. It is a terrible, terrible event that is upon us. Who are these terrorists? Who are these criminals? We must, in these harsh moments, think about the victims who are very numerous, for their families, for the wounded. We have to be compassionate and we have to be united and keep a cold head. France needs to be strong and the state needs to be strong. We will be. We also must call for everyone to be responsible. What the terrorists want is for us to be scared.
Il y a effectivement de quoi avoir peur. Il y a l'effroi.
There is something to be scared about, but in the face of terror, we have to be united, and we will vanquish these terrorists. French citizens, we have not finished the operations. There are some very difficult ones that we're dealing with right now in Paris.
De garder ici toute votre confiance dans ce que nous pouvons faire avec les forces de sécurité.
Please have faith in our security forces and that they can defend us from terrorism. Long live the Republic and long live France.
Think of the weight on his shoulders as the French president spoke to an anxious nation. They already knew about the explosions and the gunfire. They had already heard it at the stadium. The French president himself had been there. He had heard it himself. And the president knew at the time that the shooting was still underway, that the standoff was still happening at the Bataclan, that the rock concert had ended with gunfire, and that the hostages were still there. And to the microphones he went to calm a frightened nation. He said the borders would be closed. It is what he said. Afterwards, the cabinet met, and now we have a dispatch from the French capital saying that instead of closing the borders completely, they have made a new decision, and that is to restrict access significantly. A distinction, but an important one. And maybe the reason is you don't want to, quote, let the terrorists win, unquote. You don't stop all traffic. You try to go on with life in some way because, as the saying goes, what they want is to shut you down. Charles de Gaulle Airport is open, as Fox reports this hour. 20 minutes past 2 o'clock in the morning, de Gaulle is open. The Eurostar trains will run all day on Saturday. They will run, but they are offering free exchanges to people who do not wish to travel after the Paris attacks, already notifying that if you have a ticket and you don't use it, we'll refund the money. The cool heads that must prevail in organization after organization, in government after government, in the wake of all of this. And to that end, we've gotten all kinds of reports from inside the United States. For those of you who are watching us in the United States, in New York City, law enforcement say transportation agencies are all on high alert now. Massachusetts State Police say they took, quote, several actions after the attack. A, quote, multi-layered security package in place at Logan International Airport. Logan, of course, with its own history of terror and the origination of 2 flights from the attacks of 9/11. In St. Louis, the police department says it's adding a, quote, extra layer of security, unquote, for the World Cup soccer qualifying match between the United States and St. Vincent on Friday night. Chicago police say they were closing or following developments in France to determine whether to bolster city security there in America's second city, but no immediate threats. Amtrak, the U.S. passenger train service, said to be monitoring events in Paris, said there were no specific or credible threats against it. In New York City, the mayor deciding that they would raise security at transportation hubs across the 5 boroughs and beyond. New Yorkers accustomed to this, accustomed to it, but not in the wake of something like this in Paris. And we've just gotten word on the heels of all of that from inside the United States that transportation will certainly be limited inside Paris, that these checkpoints will continue inside the city, that authorities can enter any place they want at any time they want without other authority, for it has been given to them on the blanket, if you will, as the nation has declared a state of emergency, martial law, as we would put it here, where the government has control of all things, can close anything, can go into any property, can make decisions on the fly in the national interest. And we've just gotten this from the Telegraph at Bataclan, and more quotes from the gunman himself. So often when terrorist attacks happen, journalists go to people who witnessed it and survived it, and after they've calmed down, they say, what did they say? And so often the answer is they didn't say anything. So often the answer is they just fired away. Not in this case. A quote now from the Bataclan gunman, one of them, quote, "What are you doing in Syria? You are going to pay now." A quote from a witness to the Telegraph regarding the situation in Paris. Again, the first gunman quoted by an earlier witness as saying, "This is for Syria," and then firing. And another of those gunmen, if not the same, saying, "Allahu Akbar, God is great." And then the killing of 158 people that is now confirmed by authorities in Paris. The dispatches from the witnesses there are harrowing. A young man who was inside Bataclan has given a detailed account of what happened to Le Figaro, and pictures from Bataclan will tell part of the story with the ladders on the outside as people tried to escape. He said, "It was chaos. I was on the right of the room at Bataclan as the concert was ongoing. I thought I heard firecrackers. I saw the guitarist take off his guitar. I turned around and I saw a guy with an automatic weapon firing into the air. Everybody got to the ground," he said. "From that moment, instinct kicked in. With each volley," he said, "you try to get as far as possible from the gunman. Impossible to say how many. It all went too quickly." He goes on, "I tried with some other people to get onto the stage where there was an emergency exit on the right, and there was chaos. People were terrified, pleading to survive, and others pushed and pulled us to get behind the stage. We hid in a room on the right by the stage thinking it was an exit, but it was not. They went to the side room. They heard the shooting. And after a few more minutes or seconds, nothing. And then we saw people edging toward the emergency exit. When I think about it," he recalled, "the gunman must have been relocating at that point, or I should say reloading. All of our group then decided to cross, passing behind the rear curtain. Then we found ourselves and ran toward the boulevard." He goes on, "We heard shooting in the street where we were, but I didn't look back. I ran, like all the world ran, toward Bastille. On the road, there was already many police cars and motorbikes heading toward the venue. I went home. I'm okay. Others cannot say the same. I wasn't frightened, and I'm not yet in shock. I'm writing this so I don't forget." A survivor from Bataclan tonight, and a witness to the horror of humanity. Catherine Herridge works intelligence for us and is live tonight in Washington. Catherine.
Well, Shepard, the thing to be focused on this evening, specifically for investigators based on a conversation I had earlier, is the simultaneous nature of the attacks, and then also the size and scope of the number of individuals involved. So we have the simultaneous nature. We have at least 6 sites. You have to count on, I was told, approximately 2 to 3 individuals per site, 1 to 2 to execute, and at least another or a second for pre-attack surveillance and to case the operation and the existing security. In addition, you have to consider the reporting of suicide bombers. That means at least one bomb maker was involved, and then to transport the bombers to the site. Thirdly, you have to consider the concert hall. The individuals in the concert hall had familiarity with the weapons, training with the weapons, to execute so many people in a calm and consistent way, not to give in to the pressure of the situation. And finally, there were individuals in this plot who were unwilling to die for whatever the cause was. So you have to also factor in individuals who would provide safe passage or a safe haven for these individuals. When you start to add up those numbers, Shepard, what is important for the investigation this evening is that you could be looking at as many as 24 operatives involved in this operation. And also, based on the number of attacks and the geography, this would be consistent with significant premeditation as well as planning. Final point, there is no claim of responsibility in this case, but you now have effectively 2 sets of terrorist chatter, if you will. You have the ISIS accounts, which are sort of celebrating what has happened in Paris. That is not a claim of responsibility. And then you have what are called sort of primary credible accounts associated with ISIS that are reposting, my contact says, images of a Daily Mail headline from earlier this year, from approximately July, which is a story about a French jihadi in Syria executing a Syrian military officer and then promising to bring the bloodshed back to the French homeland. So it's significant that that is what's being posted on the ISIS websites. But again, at this point, there is no claim of responsibility, just the, if you will, sick chatter celebrating what happened in Paris, Shepard.
Catherine, stay with us. This update just into Fox News Now, Associated Press, Dateline Paris. The prosecutor says 5 attackers dead in attacks across the city. That's 5 dead, Catherine, and you mentioned as many as 24 involved in the planning or the execution of this. Catherine, it is, before this moment, it would have been very hard to imagine that 24 people could get together, plan and execute such a thing under the watchful eye of a city at its highest terror alert after an attack that happened in just January.
It's unknown which group was behind it, Shepard, but all of the evidence points to significant premeditation, significant planning, as well as a support network and a support structure in France. In addition, regardless of who was responsible, it really flies in the face of this sort of characterization of the current terrorist groups like ISIS as effectively focused on very regional issues. And what I mean by that in very plain terms is that they're focused on getting territory where they are and holding that territory, and that they are not focused, nor did they have the capability to launch operations on a more global scale. Based on what we have heard this evening from the attackers themselves, based on what we now know about the number of venues that were attacked, targeted in Paris, and based on what I would describe as the multiplicity of weapons involved, Kalashnikovs, grenades, suicide bombers, all of this speaks to a high-end terrorist plot, something that would be weeks or months in the making, Shepard.
Catherine, CITE, as you know, is the agency which monitors these things, and I'm looking at the tweets and other social that have gone out tonight. They share hashtags. I'm not going to share them here. They're easy enough to find if you want to find them. Quoting, "Paris is burning, and soon, Allah permitting, all the land will burn. We swear by He who made swearing lawful, you will taste the bitterness." It goes on, U.S. officials say the attacks in France are coordinated. Quoting now from another terrorism site, "This is just the beginning. Wait until the jihadis come with their cars." but the American blood is the best blood, and we will taste it soon. This is what they want to do. This is how they want us to react. They want to terrorize us, and tonight, certainly in Paris, they have. I want to show you further, to those of you who've been watching for a while now, we've not shown anything from outside the cafe where all this began. It was described to us a short time ago by a friend of the program who had been there, and there are pictures from there, and we've made a decision that we're about to show one from outside the cafe where this happened. There are times when reality is too graphic even to fathom. This is one of those. There are times when what you would see there is not something you would ever want to see, but to understand the whole story, you have to, and I'm about to show that picture. If you have little kids around the television right now, it's time for them to turn around. And if you don't have the stomach for this, then you shouldn't look either. But we're about to put it on the screen, and it's a picture of the reality outside that cafe where, as far as we know, all of this began just before 10 p.m. Paris time. Think of how this was described to us. We cannot be for certain what happened. We won't know until all of the authorities have completed their work. But I can only report to you what has been reported to us by eyewitnesses and authorities. And that is that this cafe was packed. You heard the description, like Greenwich Village or the East Village in New York City, with 12 bars on a block, as our witness described it. And gunmen inside with masks on, standing and firing from all directions as it was described to us. And then people flooding for the doors. Imagine if you were not hit, or if you were hit and wounded, but you could still move, you would, and you would head for the streets, which they did. And in the aftermath of all of it, this is one snapshot of what happened in one place of 6 across Paris that are now confirmed by police. We're no longer relying on the Agence French Presse or Reuters news agency or anyone else. The French authorities now confirm to the world there were 6 attack sites tonight in Paris, 6 of them. Coordinated attacks, almost simultaneous, but not quite. The first attacks happened to draw, it is believed, the media, well, the police, the authorities most likely to the scene, and then the attack on the theater. The attack on the theater that left 118 people at least dead. And with the 6 sites total, 140 killed across the city, with many more injured, and a death toll that will no doubt rise. And unprecedented happening since then. The controlling of the borders, the mandatory curfew for the first time since 1944, the French president putting in a state of emergency, establishing martial law, and on the Champs-Élysées at the Eiffel Tower in the City of Lights, this. The Eiffel Tower went dark tonight. And I know we have video of it. It's in Bat 10. This is a vine loop. It is lit and then goes dark tonight. The curfew is in place. There's no reason for anyone to be out. And the Eiffel Tower is dark. The hospital service says medical personnel are reporting to work on their own accord. Did you hear that? The Paris Hospital Service says medical personnel are reporting to work on their own accord. Medical personnel work in shifts because you can't work all the time. And that particular dispatch with the Dateline Paris from Associated Press reminds me of the firefighters who ran to the building after the attacks of 9/11. Not ones who had a shift, but ones who looked at the television and watching the Today Show and saw that the Twin Towers were on fire. And because they were firefighters, they went south. And so many of them lost their lives that day. And we mourn them, and we pray for their families, and we pray that the authorities in Washington and our leaders will put in place medical privileges for them for the rest of their lives, so that their wounds can be treated, so that their cancers can be treated. And today we learned that Paris hospital services say that personnel are reporting to work, quote, of their own accord, because Paris was under attack tonight, and Paris is still on high alert at this hour. And we wait for further word from authorities and police services as we work to learn whether the 5 who were killed tonight are all that there are left. For we know that the gunman who first fired in that cafe where we just saw that gruesome picture, we know that those gunmen, to our knowledge from police, are unaccounted for, as Fox reports this hour. The authorities do not know where they are. We know that the gunmen who were inside the theater, who, according to witnesses, threw grenades at the patrons, we know that they are all dead. We don't know by what means, but we know they're all dead. And we know from witness after witness that they shouted words about Syria and Allahu Akbar. And we know that the days ahead are going to be very difficult, even as those who escaped off these ladders. Remember the story from being on the roof. Some of these, no doubt, are those. Some of these had been inside that theater for those hours, watching first the concert, then watching the gunman, and then eventually were able to escape down those ladders after the 5 explosions as described to us by police, and a death toll of 118. And how did the French people respond? What are they doing now in the middle of the night? Of the French national anthem after the attacks on Paris. In a tweet from a city official's accounts, the authorities say, and I quote, all the city's amenities, including schools, museums, libraries, gyms, swimming pools, and markets, all of the city's amenities will close on Saturday. And from the terrorists on their websites, they wrote, but the American blood is best, and we will taste it soon. So that is on the exit from the stadium tonight. The French president in that stadium as well. People inside noticed the president had left sometime early in the second half to get further information, realizing the attack was ongoing, went to information services and began coordinating. And now at this hour, we're led to believe that the French president is either on his way to or now at the theater where the shootings took place, and 118 people are now confirmed dead. Trace Gallagher bringing in further developments and live with us from our West Coast News Hub. Trace, to you.
And it's amazing, Shep, because you look at the French standing in solidarity, singing the French national anthem, and the world, of course, is standing with them. We have been told by the French president that they have shut down the borders because clearly there are still suspects out there. Still, we do not know the number of how many gunmen there were, of people who had explosives. But the borders being closed, we are also told that the airports are open and the train stations are letting people come in and out. The wonder here is whether or not there is a primary link to all this. What we can find, what we've been told in the research and the work that we have done is the primary common link appears to be that the attacks were planned to hit targets with large gatherings of people, to kill, of course, as many people as possible. For now, as we have been saying, the death toll stands at 158. That will certainly change, and French authorities have warned us that we should expect that number to go up. It could go up significantly. Authorities have also confirmed that 6 different locations have now been attacked. We talked about this many times, beginning with that Cambodian street-side cafe in the 10th district. It's called La Camboge. Witnesses in a nearby bar say it appeared that it was a drive-by shooting. They said at first it sounded like firecrackers, pow, 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 and then they saw the suspects in the cars firing high volume, high-powered weapons. At least 11, maybe a dozen people thought to have been killed in that initial attack. Most of them are believed to have been dining street side near the street level where the cars went by. The attack on the soccer stadium happened during a game between France and Germany. If you were inside the stadium, as Geraldo Rivera's daughter was, you could clearly hear the explosions going off from inside. And as we learned later, the explosives were a combination of suicide bombers and hand grenades. The French president, Francois Hollande, was in the stadium. There are reports the former French president, Jacques Chirac, was also inside the stadium. Hollande was quickly escorted out. But then there was the attack, the major attack on the Bataclan, a concert hall, where a California band, a Southern California band, was playing. 3 young men apparently walked in with what witnesses said were Kalashnikov rifles. They yelled, "This is for Syria," and Allahu Akbar before opening fire. We're told the gunmen then moved to a balcony and they started firing down on people. Many inside the hall were able to escape, but up to 100 others were held hostage with the gunmen, killing them in no certain order. There are reports some men went to the balcony trying to negotiate for the life of their wives and girlfriends. But after hearing a series of gunshots, police stormed the concert hall. They went inside. They killed all 3 suspects. At least 118 people were killed inside the concert hall. Continuing coverage from the breaking news desk as well as Fox News Channel. Now back to Shepard Smith.
Trace, thank you. As we were reporting live earlier, we learned sort of together, well, we knew that there were a lot of Americans there. We knew that there were a lot of Americans in that stadium. And we learned sort of together that our own Geraldo Rivera's daughter was in that stadium and heard the explosion. His daughter, Simone. And Geraldo's live with us yet again now. How's she doing?
Hi, Shep. I think she's on the phone now. Are you there, sweetheart?
Yes, I'm here.
We're with Shepard Smith. We're live, and so many people were so worried about you, honey. Why don't you just tell us what you saw? Tell us, first of all, you were at the game, the soccer game. Did you know the president of France was at the game?
No, I didn't know the president was there. And before halftime, we all hear a very loud kind of explosive sound, but no one seemed to make any, seem worried about it or anything, except for the fellow New Yorkers by my side. But we just brushed it off as nothing. And then at halftime, we went to get food, and we saw they wouldn't let anyone leave the stadium at that point, and they weren't telling us anything, and they just had a bunch of ambulances and people just in uniform starting to look very nervous, but they wouldn't tell us anything, and so we just went back in, and we heard 2 more explosive sounds. But again, no one expressed any concern, and they didn't tell us. They didn't tell us the president was there, what was going on. And then my friend Isabel was sitting next to me, and she keeps getting calls from her mom back in the States and tells us that there's a terrorist attack happening throughout Paris. And then we try to leave, and there were teams of SWAT barricading everyone. It looked like people in bomb outfits and just preparing for everything, and no one would tell us what to do. They were just herding us like sheep, and we were all freaking out. And then there was one point where we break away, and there's just a swarm of people running at us, and we just all start running in this direction, not knowing where to go. And then all the police officers were there with their guns ready. And I don't know what happened there, but then we're all just stuck in this area in St. Denis, and we were stuck there for 4 hours because there was a blockade, a perimeter around the stadium. And I didn't know there were other attacks until you told me, and I saw on the TV that there was the concert.
Tell us how you're feeling, honey. How are you feeling right now?
I'm shaking still. Yeah, that was probably the scariest thing I ever had to deal with. They were shaking, and we don't speak French, so all the police officers couldn't help us, and we didn't know what to do. And thank God Isabel had service, so she could contact you. But yeah, we're all just freaking out, and we tried to get a room at a hotel nearby, but they locked their doors and wouldn't let anyone in. And then finally we found a store that let people in.
The hotel was locked. You tried to get into the hotel and it was locked.
Yeah, we went and we just asked if we could stay in the lobby, and they said no, and then they locked the door.
And then how scary was it to be stranded there, to not be able to take a metro? They closed the metro. No cabs, no Uber, no nothing?
At first, we were planning on walking home before we knew there were any other attacks, and it's like a 4.5-hour walk. And we just were walking. We didn't know the neighborhood, but we thought that'd be a better idea. And then people started telling us that they were, like, the military was coming in, and it was a state of emergency, and that we couldn't walk. So we had to walk back to the stadium area, and then we were just stuck there until your friend came and got us.
Do you want to come home, honey?
I do. I want to come home.
I want to come get you tomorrow.
Well, I don't know if I can go home, and the borders are shut, aren't they?
I know the borders are shut. The airports are shut. We had a plane waiting for us tomorrow morning, but they said the Paris airspace is closed. But I'm sure that they'll get around to it. It's so scary. The attacks were so widespread. So many people are dead. And it was like, you know what it was like for us here. You know, so many people knew that you were there, and so many people were so concerned about you. And
And my phone, I only had my French phone. Thank God Isabel had her phone. I couldn't even reach Mom.
I know, honey. Shepard's been covering it all night. Shep, you have any witness questions for me?
I just wonder when people first started flooding out of that stadium, what it was like, Simone. Was there a panic, or were people confused, or what was it?
At first, people were confused, and then when we saw the what looked like the French equivalent of their SWAT, then people started getting panicked, and then people started running, and there's a bunch of little kids there, and you just see all these parents, like, just not knowing what was happening, just picking up their little kids and just running in every direction, not knowing where to go. And then ultimately it calmed down after like an hour and a half, I guess. But I don't know how people got out of there. Like, they shut down everything.
A million stories about how people did get out. And Simone, while you're with us, I'll tell you that we've just gotten a dispatch from French authorities, and Geraldo, they don't know how many, but French authorities have just sent out a bulletin that a number of armed terrorists are on the loose somewhere.
Oh, honey, don't go out. Whatever you do, don't go outside. Don't go outside. Don't talk to any strangers. Just stay right where you are. Stay right where you are. Make sure the phone is charged. You got to make sure the phone is charged.
I'm not planning on leaving.
And the doors are locked and everything else, you know.
You have to figure that this initial thing was coordinated, and what authorities never have a way to know is if there's a second thing coordinated. And I don't think that from what we've gotten from French authorities, they don't know. The simplicity of the dispatch is unknown number of terrorists still on the run.
You know, I said earlier, Shep, when we first had the news, and I was reacting more as an emotional dad than as a reporter, that I thought that this was France's 9/11. The more, Catherine Herridge, and you report the scope of these coordinated attacks, I don't know, is it 4 locations now? They figure a couple of dozen of these attackers.
6 locations.
6 locations. So how, first of all, I got a text from Bernie Kerik, the former police commissioner, a dear friend of mine, who said, what a colossal failure of intelligence that something of this magnitude, this is a major, major operation involving perhaps scores of terrorists. How could it be that could be coordinated and no one in the vaunted French intelligence service even picked up a whisper? No one in the CIA picking up a whisper of this gigantic attack. I mean, particularly with the fall of the town between Mosul and Raqqa, I forget the name of it, and then the death of Jihadi John. We were feeling pretty filled with ourselves a few hours ago. We had them on the run, and now they strike in this coordinated fashion. Obviously, this was planned long before.
Think of it this morning, the President of the United States on Good Morning America with George Stephanopoulos, the ISIS are contained.
Contained. And I'm telling you, everybody's making fun of Donald Trump, bomb the shat out of them is what his plan is. It is time for half measures with ISIS. This is an editorial. Time for half measures with ISIS are over. This is so close to home now. Paris is next door to us. And it's like the United States, an open society. Now that openness has been taken advantage of by ruthless murderers who have wreaked havoc, we don't know how many are dead yet, how many are wounded. It's always worse than you hear it is when all is said and done and the death toll. And imagine the terror inside that theater. I first thought, Simone, that you were at that rock theater.
So did Mom. She said there's no way that I'd be at a soccer game.
Not with a concert ongoing.
With that band, a band that you probably know, Sim. But, thank God you weren't there. The way they butchered those people one after the other. These are savages that cannot be ignored nor contained. They have to be destroyed. And the United States has to recognize, as unsavory as it is, I've been covering this damn war for 14 years. I don't want to go back, but it's either them or us. It's ISIS or us.
We must stop Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Not to do so could risk a mushroom cloud, yellow cake from Niger. We must. Well, we did. Now, on the heels of what has happened today, we must go. And yet, the first thing we ever learned about ISIS is ISIS said, we want your troops on the ground here. We want to fight you. For if we fight you, we win. Because all we have to do is fight you to get all the troops from all over the world to come and join in the caliphate. These decisions are ones not to be made in the heat of the moment. In fact, this quote just from the concert hall, Bataclan, the French president, Francois Hollande, has gone to the concert hall where at least 118 people have been murdered. And he said, and I quote, to all those who have seen these awful things, I want to say we're going to lead a war which will be pitiless. Because when terrorists are capable of committing such atrocities, they must be certain that they are facing a determined France, a united France, a France that is together and does not let itself be moved. Even if today we express infinite sorrow. So where are we? We are on the heels of yet another attack, one the scope of which we have never seen, with leaders talking of leading a pitiless war. And what does tomorrow bring? And what does our NATO alliance mean? And what does this mean for all free people of the world as they try to remain such? We are on the precipice of something new, as we were on the day of the attacks of 9/11, and we stood on the roof of this building and said, we're in the middle of a new normal. We're in the middle of a new normal tonight. What happens tomorrow and the weeks ahead will chart the course for the rest of our civilization. It is that momentous, I believe.
I agree with you 100%. In Saddam Hussein's case, we didn't have the evidence. In this case, the smoking gun is apparent to one and all. We know where the bullet was fired from. We know where it hit. And now it is incumbent on the President of the United States and both sides of the aisle to review the evidence as diligently as they can. But I think that the President of France tonight, Shep, has hit the nail right on the head.
Where do you go to fight them? You go to their lands to fight them in the middle of their civil war.
I think I know where their capital is. They advertise it all the time. It is Raqqa in Syria.
It is.
I know the city of Mosul. I was almost killed. Craig and I and Greg Hart almost killed in Mosul. Our car got hit 14 times. I know where Mosul is. I know where they are. They are bragging on this. They are unleashing Sunni Muslim extremism that will not stop. The Atlantic Ocean will not stop them. I think we have to do something very aggressively, importantly, diligently, patriotically, conscientiously important for the people of the United States and the free world. We have to crush ISIS.
And in the moment, we had to hug those we love, and you need to get Sim back around here.
I want you back home so bad.
I want to go back home.
And don't go out.
Studying over there, right, Aurora?
Don't go out. She's an A student. That's her sister Isabel over there. She's an A student, Simone is, at Northwestern University. I'm so proud of her. She's on the sailing team. And what a nice thing for her to do her junior semester abroad in Paris, of all places, the City of Lights. And now for her to be a witness to this harsh history is more than a dad can bear.
What do the days ahead mean for you?
Well, for me, first of all, I want to physically see her, and I want to hug her. I've been on the phone with Bill Shine. As I said to Simone, we had a charter plane ready to leave tomorrow. It's on hold pending the opening of the airspace in Paris.
Which is now reopened. But
it has reopened.
American Airlines are not flying in there, but the airspace is open. Francois Hollande went back on his previous statement of closing the borders, now says there will be extra security checkpoints, trying, quote, not to let them win, unquote.
Sim, I'll be there soon, sweetheart.
I hope so.
Geraldo Rivera and his daughter Simone, and there will be those who say, what are you doing putting him on there, talking about his own family? Why is this about him in the middle of all this? It is not. The point of all of this is that we all have a stake in all of this. All of us, every one of us, collectively and individually. Geraldo has a daughter who was in a soccer stadium tonight, heard an explosion or something and didn't know. And is the president here? What? And whatever the plans were for tonight, the friends over for beer at the house tonight, going to see LSU game next weekend, all of those things are a moment for yesterday, just as they were after the attacks of 9/11, because this is something we have never, ever seen in our lifetimes. See, Pearl Harbor was bombed, 9/11 happened. There are so many things that have changed our lives as individuals, and all of them, each different from the previous. This one is new and different for us all. This one began in a cafe as it was described to us, and these facts may change, but they have held to this moment, and it's been many hours. The first reports were masked men stood up, firing in all directions, more than a dozen dead. At the same time, those explosions heard inside the stadium. At first, there was word, well, maybe they were grenades, because we were hearing grenades, but that was from another place. Authorities now confirm 2 of these were suicide bombers. One of the suicide bombers found in pieces and parts on the street and confirmed to be that, the other unknown, and a bomb in another location. That was the beginning, as security services went running toward that place. And the friends with whom we've spoken tonight went running away from that place and herded, as Simone put it, like cattle. At the same time, at this theater where the American band was playing, to a somewhat, though not exclusively, of course, but a lot of Americans in the audience, all of a sudden there was gunfire. And at first, is it part of the show? And then they fired more and more with Kalashnikovs or AK-47s. Then grenades, as authorities put it, being thrown at those who were inside the theater, escaping to the roof in some cases, coming out with blood covered over them in other cases, explaining what was going on inside there. Many on social media and otherwise saying, police, come save us. They are killing us one by one. And later we would learn the death toll in that place alone was 118. 3 different locations, and here on the news deck we're getting report after report that there are more. That there is a shopping mall that is so famous that many who are here right now know exactly what it is. And now we know there was another attack there, and that there are 2 other locations, and that they all happened at exactly the same time. And not in an environment where no one was expecting anything, not in an environment where our guard was not up. No, at the highest security level possible in one of the most famous cities in all the world, where they've been having problems for months and years, where they have changed laws in the face of things before unseen, where they've made new rules for people about what they can wear, because situations have gotten so difficult that they're impossible to bear, where all of their antennas up, and where tonight something happened completely off the radar to our knowledge. A series of coordinated attacks. At this point, we believe dozens of people involved in actually carrying it out. And who knows the level of coordination behind the scenes that it took. And they did it without anyone hearing, without the CIA or international services or anyone over in London or anybody in Paris hearing anything. And the president of France was in a soccer stadium that was right there, close enough to hear the explosions himself, to walk down and begin to deal with the information, to go to that theater and stand in front of all and say, to all who have been seeing these awful things, I want to say that we are going to lead a war which will be pitiless. The French president now says we will lead a war that will be pitiless. He sent his military to the streets and put in place a curfew for the first time in the city of Paris since 1944. We are in a new world with a new future, and what we had planned is no longer important, for there is a new task at hand, and we shall see how our leaders deal with it. Megyn Kelly continues our coverage right now.
Breaking tonight, Paris under lockdown. The French borders closed and a massive nationwide manhunt is underway as a devastating series of attacks rock America's oldest ally, the nation that stood by us after 9/11, that gifted us the Statue of Liberty. France tonight fell victim to the worst terror attack in its history. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. Here is what we know at this hour. At home, the NYPD is deploying counterterrorism teams. American Airlines is holding all flights to Paris, France. Authorities here say there is no specific or credible threat to the United States, and our government is pledging to do all it can to assist French investigators. Back in France, the lights of the Eiffel Tower have gone dark. Paris is under an effective police state. A curfew is in effect, officials declaring the ability to seize and confiscate people's weapons and impose house arrest on anyone considered dangerous. This as the death toll climbs. More than 150 people believed to have been murdered in multiple attacks across Paris tonight. The worst of it coming during a hostage standoff at a sold-out concert featuring an American band, the Eagles of Death Metal. Eyewitnesses say the attackers were shouting Allah Akbar, killing people one by one, shooting them as they were on the floor, even searching for anyone who might have been hiding, reloading to take out as many people as they could, over and over and over again. Police finally storming the hall to take out the attackers. From everything we can tell, what they found inside was apocalyptic. Around 100 people killed there. Listen to one man who managed to get away, describing the horrors of what he saw. This is in French with subtitles, but the story he tells is heart-stopping.
Qu'est-ce que vous voyez à l'heure actuelle? Vous étiez à l'intérieur de la salle? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé précisément?
On est en plein concert, il y a des mecs qui sont arrivés, ils ont commencé à tirer au niveau de l'entrée vers vas-y avance maman avance. Et en fait ils ont tiré en plein dans la foule en criant à la Akbar avec des fusils à pompe, je crois, parce que les gens train de charger. Et du coup après tout le monde sait que le concert s'est arrêté, tout le monde s'est couché à terre et continue à tirer sur les gens. Et là putain c'est un enfer. Pardon.
Je vous en prie, c'est tout à fait normal vu les circonstances. Quelle a été votre réaction à ce moment-là? Qu'est-ce que vous avez pu faire?
Ce que j'ai fait, j'ai pris ma mère, on s'est couché au sol. Et à un moment, il y a quelqu'un qui a dit ils sont partis, donc du coup on a réussi à courir. On s'est enfui par une issue de secours du côté du Bataclan. Il y avait encore des coups de feu et voilà, j'ai juste fait en sorte de survivre avec ma mère. Je voulais juste que ma mère soit là.
Votre mère est à vos côtés, vous avez pu sortir de cette salle de spectacle.
On est dans la voiture, on est rue Lafayette là actuellement.
Est-ce que des personnes se trouvent encore en ce moment dans la salle du Bataclan?
Il me semble que oui, je sais pas, je peux pas vous dire, je pense que oui. Je sais pas, nous quand on est parti, on a enjambé des corps, vous comprenez. C'est un cauchemar.
Louis, oui. Dans ce cauchemar, est-ce que vous avez pu voir les assaillants?
Non, je vais pas vous mentir, j'ai juste vu des silhouettes quand ils ont commencé à tirer les premiers coups de feu en fait, si vous voulez.
Et vous vous êtes couché, ils ont prononcé les mots que vous nous dites.
Allahu Akbar, voilà, Allahu Akbar et je sais plus d'autres, je sais plus.
Merci Louis pour ce témoignage.
Je vous en prie.
En direct sur France Info, bon courage.
Je vais juste dire que courage à tous les gens qui sont victimes de cette horreur. Courage à tout le monde.
This is hell. You heard it there. On the left side of your screen, we are bringing in live pictures from Paris provided by various news agencies, including our sister network, Sky News. At this hour, some 1,500 soldiers have been deployed across Paris. The French president saying, in the face of terror, France must be strong. As we mentioned before, there were a number of attacks in Paris tonight, including near the biggest stadium in France, where the French president was watching a soccer match between France and Germany and had to be evacuated from that stadium, as well as another horrific attack at a restaurant south of the stadium. The attacker opening fire, spraying the windows as diners fell to the floor. Police report that at least 11 people were killed there. And we are joined now by American Margot Schmorak, who was eating dinner in Paris when she heard shots fired at the restaurant that was attacked. Margot, thank you so much for being with us tonight. So you're there in Paris, and what was the first sign you had that something had gone wrong?
Well, we were sitting outside at the restaurant on the sidewalk, kind of in front of the doors of the restaurant, and my colleagues and I, there were 4 of us sitting at a 4-top table, and we heard about 8 to 10 shots, and we didn't really understand what they were. We weren't sure if they were gunshots. And then we heard actually two other sounds, which were also gunshots. They were different from the first bunch that we heard. And my colleague actually said, I think those are gunshots. And I looked up and I saw 8 to 10 people running around the corner towards our restaurant. And we all got up immediately from the table and ran inside. And we heard more gunshots as we were running inside the restaurant.
How many would you say you heard?
You know, it's hard to say. The first round was probably 10 to 12. And then, like I said, we heard a few that sounded different. And my friends and I were just talking about how the two in the middle sounded like maybe they were a smaller weapon. The first were like a semiotic weapon, like boom, 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 and then they were kind of pop, pop, and then another boom, boom, boom. And during the second round, we ran inside, so I couldn't tell you exactly how many.
Could you tell where the gunshots were coming from?
No, it sounded like they were very close. So, I mean, we were about a half a block away. Like I said, we were around a corner. And we actually saw people running, coming around the corner from two corners where we were. And we were just looking up online where the shooting was reported to have happened. And it actually was the block is a triangular block. So we actually were kind of on the other side of that block. And it felt very close.
Did you have an understanding in that moment, given everything going on in the world, that this was likely a terror attack?
You know, you have this moment where time kind of slows down when you have to make a split-second decision about what to do. And I remember thinking, I think those are gunshots. I don't want to die today. And I just ran inside.
What was the mood? What was it? Was it panic? Was it controlled?
So the local Parisians were actually very calm. And I think the only people in the restaurant where we were at who were actually very agitated were the people who were outside. As Americans, we were pretty scared, and we went in and we saw a family with young children. They were sitting in the restaurant in the main level, and there was a basement level that looked safer. And so I actually said to the family, I think you need to bring the children downstairs. And then the mother of the small children started to get very scared. I have two young children myself, so that part was very scary. But for the most part, people were really calm in the restaurant. I mean, personally, I was very scared, but a lot of other people were sort of taking it a little bit more calmly than I was, honestly.
Were you able at any point this evening to see what had actually happened at the restaurant across the way?
No. So we at one point, about maybe 45 minutes after the shooting had happened and the police had kind of cordoned off the area, we went and poked our heads around the corner because we thought, well, maybe it was an isolated incident or maybe it wasn't a shooting, and we just didn't really understand what had happened. And we saw the police there. We heard that there were bodies that people saw. We didn't see any ourselves. And then we went back into the restaurant. It just seemed like the safest place to be.
Tonight, after you got out, I mean, at what point, first of all, were you able to leave, and what was it like when you did leave? I mean, you must have been worried something else could happen.
Yeah, we were very worried. We were checking with our families back in the United States, some of who have access to people who are can help us kind of think about the situation, and we were getting really conflicting advice about what to do. Some said stay put in the restaurant, others said we have to leave because they're targeting restaurants. We ended up staying for about 3 hours from 9:30 to a little bit after midnight, and at which point we decided to leave. And we actually had to walk back to our apartment that we're staying in, which was about a 30-minute walk, and that was pretty scary too. We actually saw police officers on the way back, and we asked them, where is it safe to walk? And she said, honestly, I don't know. And she said, just go to your hotel. So we just walked as quickly as we could.
Wow. I mean, we have a picture of some of the carnage at the restaurant, and we warn the viewers it is disturbing, and you can see what appears to be the bodies of the dead, some of them. And this is it. We put it not up for shock value, but to underscore what has happened in Paris, France tonight. People just out trying to bond with fellow human beings and have a meal were shot dead in and around the restaurant. And that included many Americans were in these restaurants. We don't know the nationalities of the dead, nor is it particularly relevant. But Margot, you were there. I know you're the mother of two young children, and after you left the scene tonight, you managed to get a picture of them. You must be feeling like one of the lucky ones this evening.
Yeah, I am, definitely.
We're very glad you're safe. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We're getting reports that 5 attackers have been killed. But Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herod suggests it likely took upwards of a dozen people to plan and execute an attack of this magnitude. meaning this manhunt is likely far from over. Those who are said to have been shooting into at least one of these restaurants did so from a car and then drove away. And that's not even to take into account the multiple other shooters who appear to have been in Paris, France tonight and may be unaccounted for. Congressman Peter King is the chairman of the Counterterrorism and Intelligence Subcommittee of the Homeland Security Committee. He's with us tonight. Congressman, thank you for being here. First, just give us the big picture. Give us the big picture on what we've seen today.
This was a vicious, diabolical attack carried out, I'm certain, by Islamic terrorists, most likely ISIS. It's the nightmare scenario that all of us who deal with intelligence and Islamic terrorism fear. That the fact that you could have foreign fighters, most likely coming back from Syria, carrying out an attack like this, coordinated attacks, hitting all different levels of society, hitting restaurants, hitting a concert hall, hitting a soccer stadium, to create this fear, this feeling of fear and absolute confusion and chaos. This was terrorism at its worst, and this is what could happen really in any major large city in the United States or in Europe. And we have to always be on our guard. I hope this is a wake-up call. I hope the president is listening when this morning he said that ISIS is contained. This shows that it's going to be a long, hard fight before ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Islamic terrorism is contained and destroyed. So this is a war, and we have to realize that we have to stop holding back and stop making believe that our main worry is how fast we can close Guantanamo. Our main goal has to be how quickly we can destroy ISIS.
The situation is fluid, and we are working on preliminary information. But according to one report, one of the men arrested near the Bataclan, the concert hall, where so many were murdered tonight, the man taken into custody reportedly told the authorities, "I was recruited by ISIS along with 3 others coming from Syria." There has been a huge controversy in France over how many of these refugees coming from Syria they should take, and whether it was a matter of being humane or whether it was a matter of potentially jeopardizing the people of France and their safety. We, too, have been engaged in the same debate here in the United States, and we have taken in over 1,000. The president says we'll take in 10,000. The question I have for you is how confident are you that we have an adequate screening process here?
Megan, I'm not confident at all. I have no confidence. And by the way, neither does the FBI or the other agencies in our government, because they have no databases to work from. We don't know who these people are. There are no records. There are no government records we can go to. There's no personnel records we can go to. We don't know who these people are. So you have, and we know that ISIS does want to infiltrate terrorists into Europe and the United States with these refugees. Also, in addition to that, you have the foreign fighters. There's thousands of Europeans, many of them French, who have gone down to Syria to fight alongside ISIS, to be trained as terrorists, and they are coming back into Europe. And once they get to Europe, they can fly into the United States without getting a visa. This is a very desperate situation, and I don't hear many people in our government talking about it, many candidates talking about it. The president somehow thinks ISIS is under control. And you think of what's happened just in the last week. There's been the Russian jet has come down. There's been over 200 people killed, men, women, and children. The bombs going off in Lebanon. Now what we're seeing tonight in Paris. This is, Megan, this is the real deal. And when I think of all the attacks that were made on the NYPD, because the fact that they were monitoring potential terrorists here in New York City, well, maybe if the Paris police could have incorporated those same methods, this may not have happened. And
but we're not doing that anymore here in New York.
Well, let me give Commissioner Bratton, he's doing the best he can under certain circumstances, and it's not as much as it was done before, and that's part of the problem we face. But I will say, even,
is there any other way? Is there any other way in a free society? And some would question whether we are free if you have, the law enforcement infiltrating places like mosques. I understand that. But is there any other way, besides doing that you can realistically prevent someone from strapping on a suicide vest and walking into a public place and detonating it, or doing a drive by a restaurant and opening up fire with an AK-47?
Megan, there really isn't. That's the reality. I mean, you need a combination. We have to use the NSA. We have to use the CIA, the FBI, the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, and the police on the ground. Now, just this past July, we were told that ISIS was going to attack the United States, specifically New York, over the 4th of July. 5 ISIS operatives were arrested in New York City and northern New Jersey. If they had not been arrested, if they had not been stopped, we could have seen over the 4th of July the same type of carnage that we saw in Paris today.
How significantly, if at all, does this raise the alert level here? You know, we used to have the color-coded system. We got rid of that.
Yeah.
But what is likely to happen here in America over the next days and weeks?
Well, I can assure you that within moments of this happening in Paris, all of our agencies, FBI, Homeland Security, National Counterterrorism Center, FBI, all of them came together. The Joint Terrorism Task Forces, NYPD, here and I'm sure other police departments around the country, consolidating and assessing as much intelligence as they could, increasing the security patrols. In New York, you're going to see a higher level of police protection, and there's going to be more police activity that you don't see. And I'm sure that'll be repeated in other major cities across the country. You're going to see more security at the airports. You're going to see us sharing whatever intelligence we have with the French, with the British, with the Germans and the Spaniards, because we don't know whether or not these attacks were just coordinated for Paris, or are they part of a worldwide series of coordinated attacks? All of that has to be looked at, and that's what's going on right now. It's a full court press.
We talked about essentially it's a police state tonight in France, where they're saying they can place you under house arrest if they find you suspicious. They can confiscate your weapons. Could that kind of thing happen here if we were to suffer an attack like this?
Megan, we certainly don't want that to happen. And that's why when I was talking about the NYPD before and certain activities I think the FBI should carry out, to me, those are entirely within the Constitution. Yes, it's going further than maybe some of us in our idealistic world would like, but it does say within the Constitution. The danger is if something like this does happen, what happened in Paris, that people will want to give martial law powers to the government. We don't want that. I don't want that. But if we keep restricting the legitimate rights of police and the legitimate rights of law enforcement, if people keep yelling about the NSA, then we could reach a situation where we do have an attack like this, and then people call for much more severe action than would have been required in the first place. And I would not want that to happen.
Congressman Peter King, thank you, sir.
Megan, thank you.
Well, we also have some new details coming in just a moment ago about the retaking of the Bataclan Concert Hall. 100 people were reportedly killed. These are preliminary numbers. They're going to change, folks, when these terrorists stormed the venue. But now we are hearing some reports from French police that in the effort to retake the popular music venue, 4 officials, possibly police officers, lost their lives as well. And here is how one witness described the scene shortly before that rescue operation was executed.
Julian Pierce is joining us. He's a radio reporter. Julian, I understand you were inside the Bataclan Theater during this concert that American rock band Eagles of Death Metal were performing, but now you've made it outside. Tell us what you've seen and what you've heard.
Well, I've seen two terrorists, from my point of view, with AK-47 Kalashnikovs entering the concert room and firing randomly to the crowd. People yelled, screamed, and everybody lying on the floor. And it lasted for 10 minutes, 10 horrific minutes, where everybody was on the floor covering their head. And we heard so many gunshots, and the terrorists were very calm, very determined. And they reloaded 3 or 4 times their weapons, and they didn't shout anything. They didn't say anything. They were unmasked. They were wearing black clothes, and they were shooting at people on the floor, executing them. And I was luckily at the top of the stage, in front of the stage, so people started to try to escape, to work on people on the floor and to try to find an exit. And I found an exit when the terrorists reloaded his guns in the meantime, and I the terrorists in there, and they're hiding in some kind of room in the dark, and they text me, and they're very afraid, of course, and they're waiting for the police to intervene. But it's been over 2 hours now, and this is terrible. What happened was terrible, terrific. I mean, honestly, 15 minutes, 10 minutes of gunshots firing randomly in a small concert room. I mean, the Bataclan is not a huge concert room. It's a small one. I suppose 1,000 people were there maximum, and it was horrible.
Julian, with these terrorists, and you say you saw 3 or 4 of them, you say they were dressed in black. Were their faces covered with masks?
They were not wearing masks. I mean, they were unmasked. I've seen the face of one guy, of one terrorist. He was very young. He was like 20 years old, 25 maximum. He wasn't wearing a bear or something. He was like a random guy holding a Kalashnikov. That's all. And they were not masked.
And did you hear any words coming out of his mouth? Was he speaking in French or Arabic or anything you could discern?
Nothing. I've heard nothing. Just the yelling and the screaming of the people. But they didn't shout anything. They didn't say anything. Not Allah Akbar or something like this. They said nothing. They just shot. They were just shooting to people.
So they weren't questioning anyone who they were. They would just look at someone and shoot and kill them. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And you say you saw 20 people shot and killed, at least 20 bodies there on the floor of the theater?
Yes. I can confirm that. Some of them were dead. Some others were very badly wounded. But it was a bloodbath.
A total blood, and it's still continuing right now. You're outside the theater, as far as you know, Julian. The hostage crisis there and the killing presumably is continuing.
Yes, I'm not sure of the information, but I've got a bunch of friends who are hiding right now in the concert room. And they're hiding because they're not sure if the terrorists are still there.
All right.
And the police is not inside.
Julian, are you okay, Julian?
I'm okay. I'm outside the concert room. I'm in an apartment, and the police guys are all over me, all around me. So I'm okay.
All right, Julian, be careful over there.
Unbelievable testimonial. Just hours after the news broke, President Obama here came out to address the tragic attacks in Paris. He called it an attack on all of humanity and vowed to stand ready to help the people of France in any way possible. James Rosen reports from the White House live tonight for us. James.
Megan, good evening. President Obama was informed of these attacks in Paris by Lisa Monaco, the assistant to the president for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. He spoke for only 5 minutes in the White House briefing room in something that was obviously hastily arranged. He told us that he has not contacted French President François Hollande because President Obama said it was his expectation that Mr. Hollande is busy right now, but that he expected to speak with him in the next few days. Ironically, President Obama had spoken with the French president earlier today, much earlier today, before any of this transpired, to discuss their shared participation in an upcoming economic summit. But the president said that we stand by the French. He said that we have offered all kinds of assistance to the French authorities as they may need. And he said, and I'm quoting him now, we stand together with the French in the fight against terrorism and extremism.
This is a heartbreaking situation, and obviously those of us here in the United States know what it's like. We've gone through these kinds of episodes ourselves. And whenever these kinds of attacks happened, we've always been able to count on the French people to stand with us. They have been an extraordinary counterterrorism partner, and we intend to be there with them in that same fashion.
Secretary of State John Kerry is in Vienna, ready to convene a summit on Syria. He has issued a statement as well, and we're told that the U.S. Embassy in Paris has been working hard to make sure that any Americans who may have been affected by this attack have the full help of the United States government behind them. A French embassy official here in Washington told me that at one point they counted at least 5 situations that were live and ongoing, including the stadium, the 2 restaurants, and 2 others, Megan. So this obviously in a major attack. The State Department has been briefing some members of Congress, and there are some indications that there may have been some inklings on the part of the French authorities of a plot underway, and we're still working to confirm that. One last point here. I asked the French official if any Americans were known to be harmed, hurt, killed, held hostage, etc. And this official told me that given the venues we're talking about and the sheer numbers that we're talking about, quote, they're not all going to be French. Megan.
James, thank you. As we watch the screen, we see folks walking by in the shiny blanket that they tend to give you after you run a marathon, a warming blanket. And we believe that these are survivors of the attack that we saw on the concert hall in particular, where people were held hostage for hours and hours trying to hide from the gunman as they continue to reload over and over and over again. Some witnesses talking about how they had to go to the roof of the facility, about how they had to push through doors and more doors and more doors, and 30 to 40 of them wound up on the roof. And then they saw a man who was waving to them from a neighboring house and waved them over and said, "Come here," and helped them escape by bringing them into his own home through his attic so these people could get out of the facility in which they were being shot down mercilessly, one after the other. That is how many of the people managed to emerge from this facility, from which you heard the one witness say earlier, "This is hell." As we reported earlier tonight, intelligence correspondent Catherine Herridge believes it may have taken upwards of a dozen people to plan and execute this attack, this coordinated attack at 6 separate sites. And while officials are not providing an estimate, the Paris prosecutor said just moments ago that, quote, accomplices may still be on the loose. Catherine Herridge is live with us tonight with the very latest. Catherine, so do we know now who was responsible for this?
We do not know who is responsible, but Megan, tonight there are 2 separate threat streams that are being followed. One involves credible ISIS accounts or ISIS sympathetic accounts. These are accounts that are celebratory in their tone, lauding the attack in Paris, but they are not claiming responsibility for the attack itself. We saw a similar pattern with the attack on Charlie Hebdo, the satirical magazine, and that was ultimately, the blame was ultimately affixed on 2 brothers who were trained by al-Qaeda in Yemen. There was also, though, a second set of chatter from ISIS-related accounts, and they are reposting a story that was published by a British newspaper, the Daily Mail, in July of this year, and it was about a French jihadi who had executed a Syrian military officer and then promised to bring the massacre and the bloodbath to the French land itself. This is being reposted by ISIS accounts, almost trying to suggest that the French had been warned about their intervention in Syria. But the bottom line for viewers tonight is that there has not been a credible claim of responsibility, but there has been significant activity on these ISIS social media accounts, Megan.
And there's been plenty of celebration by ISIS as well online. They have a hashtag going out called Paris in Flames. Catherine, stand by just for 1 second. I have more I want to go through with you, but we want to dip into our sister network, Sky News, to listen to what's happening.
More than 140 people have been killed in the combination of attacks, the majority of them at the Bataclan Theatre, perhaps more than 120 people. Although, bearing in mind, we believe that 1,200 were attending this concert by the American rock band, so it may well be that many of them did manage to survive. Rebecca, you were getting indications that people had literally been sort of sheltering between seats and lying down to avoid all the gunfire.
Yes, that's the reports coming out of Paris at the moment, that dozens managed to survive. You can see some of them in the shots on the screen at the moment. Of course, people with these foil blankets keeping themselves warm. Some have come out of the venue covered in blood. As you say, we understand there are around 1,200 people there, so a huge proportion of them now, we know, have died. But like you say, they were sheltering under seats in the gallery, lots of them hiding on the top tiers of this concert venue. But the shocking news, as you just read out, that the Paris police prefect has said the attackers blew themselves up with suicide belts as the police closed in, and of course a number of people were killed there. And I mean, presumably in the coming hours we'll get more information about exactly what went on inside that concert venue. Apparently all the attackers are now dead. 5 have been killed, although authorities are hunting for any possible accomplices. We're just getting that in now, just breaking that news now. They're hunting for any possible accomplices. So,
although I guess we ought to add there's no confirmation that.
And Sky News on the same page as we are with respect to the accomplices, still on the loose potentially and being searched for by investigators. Catherine, so ISIS has not claimed responsibility but is celebrating this, and we have heard some varying eyewitness accounts about the shooters saying Allahu Akbar, and in particular at the Bataclan Theater there was an eyewitness who said that they heard gunmen talking about Iraq and Syria. So what are investigators focused on right now?
Look, investigators this evening are focused on the simultaneous nature of these attacks, at least 6 at this time that have been counted, and also on the level of premeditation and the scope and the support network. You have to think of each of these attack sites like a separate cell having responsibility for it. When you look at the breakdown, you anticipate in a situation such as this that there are at least 2 operatives who do advanced surveillance, so they understand the layout of the target, and then you also have to do an assessment of what the security is in the neighborhood. So you would go to that part of Paris on a weekend evening, on a Friday night, to understand the pattern of the police and the security services. The next thing that you have to look at here is the use of what I would call sort of a multiplicity of military hardware. The grenades, the effectiveness, and the handling of the AK-47 at the concert hall certainly suggests a familiarity with the weapon, training outside of Paris, and then also the suicide belts or bombers themselves. You've got to have someone who is familiar with explosives, has experience making these bombs, so not to have an incident in advance that would tip off police. Then you also have to consider that some of these operatives were not willing to die on the mission and would therefore have an escape route, a series of accomplices or safe houses. When you start tallying up all those numbers, Megan, you are looking at upwards of a dozen people easily, and you are looking at an operation which would not be a pickup operation, but would take weeks, perhaps even months of planning. We learned within the last hour that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was briefed. That gives you a sense of how highly this is being circulated within the administration, and we were told to focus on this migrant stream as well as the returning foreign fighters, as you just heard from Congressman Peter King.
Catherine, thank you. We'll be back to you in a bit. Well, as Catherine just mentioned, France's official news outlet is reporting that the 3 attackers at the concert hall scene detonated explosive suicide belts as the authorities closed in. Joining me now, former CIA operative Morton Storm, who was once an insider in al-Qaeda in Yemen, so he knows how these guys operate firsthand. Morton, thank you for being here. Here's my first question. Are they getting more aggressive? Because we saw, if this is ISIS, we've seen now them blow up a Russian airliner over Egypt, and now we see this coordinated attack that must have taken some level of sophistication and planning.
You know, it's not surprising. I've warned against this for over a year now. Since the uprising of ISIS. The sleeper cells have woken up since Charlie Hebdo, the attack. And I think the only way is to do as France have done today, is to close all the borders and stop the invasions from these countries. Last week I said there will possibly be an attack soon. So, and unfortunately, I was right in this.
The sleeper cells have woken up. The question, though, is, you know, they've closed the borders now. What we're being told is the borders are closed to those who want to leave France, not necessarily to those who want to come in France. They perhaps are trying to suggest that the accomplices, or perhaps if there are any remaining perpetrators, might be trying to leave. So are those who may have helped in this endeavor, who are still alive, do you believe they'd be hiding in plain sight in Paris? I mean, how do they go about... These cells have got to be well hidden and well coordinated to have pulled this off. So how do they find them?
Well, these people are allowed to pretend to be one of us. It's a warfare, strategic warfare, according to Islam, that you can pretend to be amongst the enemies and be a part of them until you are given the permission to kill. So this is what happened in the time of Prophet Muhammad. I have studied Islam for 10 years. I have infiltrated the highest ranks of Al-Qaeda in East Africa and also in Yemen. And I know inside and out how these people think, the strategies they're using, and they are allowed to pretend being non-Muslims even. Mm-hmm. So it's very sophisticated, it's very calculated and sneaky.
This may sound like a simple question, forgive me, but when you hear the barbarity of it, just going into a concert hall and standing there with these AK-47s just one by one picking off the people and reloading, and then again, civilians, targeted civilians, and in restaurants just going by and lobbing in grenades, according to the reports. One struggles to wonder, these aren't hard targets, these are soft targets. Is there any thought? I mean, there's no thought, is there, given to the fact that these are civilians, that on that airplane we saw over Egypt, there were babies on board. They don't care.
No. If it justifies the cause, it's permissible in Islam. I can say that. This is according to Hadith. In Bukhari and Muslim, I have studied this. So I can say this, and I don't care what other imams are trying to say, because I have here a lot of apologetic, lying imams saying that Islam is peaceful. It is not. In fact, it's very violent towards non-Muslims, and it's permissible for these mujahideens, if you call it so, to kill non-Muslims, even civilians.
So what would be the reaction inside of these cells or groups, if this is ISIS or some ISIS sympathetic group tonight? They would see this as a victory, I presume, and what would it encourage? More?
Yes, this is going to encourage them even more. And I don't believe that these people are trying to escape France. In fact, they're trying to get into Europe. They are staying here. They are not going to leave alive. They will die in this fight.
What stops it from happening here? I mean, you look at I don't know, for lack of a better term, the ease with which they just shot up these restaurants and this concert hall, and yet you have to wonder what stops it from happening here. Do you know?
The only way is to fight fire with fire. We need to totally wipe ISIS out in the Middle East. We need to deport anyone who have links to Islamic extremism, or not extremism, but militant fundamentalism, if I say so.
They're like cancer cells. You wipe out one group, and then if there's just one left, they metastasize and they start again. I mean, is there any wiping out a group like this?
Well, there should be a ban on political and militant Islam in Europe, and anyone who have links from outside to such ideology should not be allowed into the country.
That's tough. That's tough to do. I mean, when you have open borders and a free society, how do you stop it from happening? And that's one of the debates that we're having right now. And in fact, we're getting statements from all the presidential candidates here. One that just came in from Senator Cruz said that this is a clear, an unmistakable escalation of ISIS's ambitions. Do you agree with that?
You know what? We have so-called professors or experts in counterterrorism who teach at King's College in London and other places. These people suggest that we should allow these terrorists to come back again to Europe so we can understand them. I do not know how they can think rationally like this. I mean, those who have been involved today in this horrific attack, some of them are returned fighters from Syria and Iraq. They came back with experience. I warned against this. Strip away the nationalities from these people.
Morten, thank you for being with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Joining me now from Paris, Adam Kirk, who is a University of Washington student who was near the concert hall where the attackers took hostages and reportedly killed more than 100 people tonight. Adam, thank you for being with us. So you're an American in France, and what was the first you understood that something terrible had happened this evening?
Yeah, I'm just studying abroad over here in Paris. I happen to be right by where the Bataclan Theater is, and I was just on Twitter actually following the soccer game between France and Germany. I'm a big soccer fan, and they mentioned something about an explosion, which I thought obviously was very suspicious, but again, it's a soccer game, so there's always, loud bangs and stuff like that. So I went to my window and I heard a lot of sirens and stuff going past for about 10, 15 minutes, which is very rare for the area I'm in. It's a very quiet area pretty much all the time. And so I messaged my dad to see if he had heard anything on the news or anything, and there hadn't been anything on the news. And then about 5 minutes later, I went back to the window just trying to kind of hear what was going on. I'm in a little courtyard area, so I'm off the street, so I couldn't actually see. But then I heard 2 or 3 loud explosions, stuff, that I've never heard before, stuff like out of a video game, and it was obviously very scary.
And then what did you see next? Was there a horde of people coming, or what happened?
So actually, it took about an hour, and then I believe that's when the hostage situation was taking place at the theater. It's just around the corner. And so during that period, the police came in and they took out all the cars in my lot, and they came in and checked the area, and then I would imagine it was when they went in to clear the scene, I heard 5 large explosions again. They sounded like grenades or something like that. And then at that point, about 100 people came rushing into my courtyard. They all obviously looked very panicked. A couple people didn't have shirts on. One guy had a huge abrasion on his leg. And they came running in my courtyard. And at that point, actually, I kind of locked all my doors and stuff and laid low just because I didn't know exactly what was happening.
This is a picture of the courtyard about which you're speaking. So you saw at least one injury. How many injuries did you see?
I didn't see a whole bunch of injuries, actually. So about 30 minutes to an hour went by, and everyone was just kind of standing and milling around. Once I realized it was a little more safe of a situation, I went out and I tried to offer people some water. I actually charged phones for a couple of people whose phones were dying. But I didn't see too many people who were injured, but a lot of people had on the gold kind of shock blankets that they give out, and everybody was just, there were some people just like shaking their heads and obviously very distraught.
And where did they go? How long were they there, and what did the police do with them?
They were there for a solid 3 hours at least. Then the police came in, and they all went back out. I don't know exactly where they are. I haven't obviously been out of the courtyard for safety reasons, but I did see some pictures online, and there's a triage area set up within 10 steps of where my front door is, so they could have taken them there or some other place. But my whole street's completely locked down. Military. It's kind of like a war zone, honestly.
We are told that the taxi cabs in Paris are free to those milling about the city tonight, and there is no milling. There are only people who are trying to return home from dangerous sites, and they have no place to go. Paris is under lockdown. You are not supposed to be outside, and yet so many hundreds of Parisians, thousands, were stuck outside in venues, never expecting to find themselves in the midst of a coordinated terror attack. I want to reiterate what we had heard moments ago, which is now that The Guardian and others are saying, that's a paper, and others are reporting that the officials in Paris are saying that they have that all of the attackers are believed dead. Yep. That they believe all of the attackers are dead, but they are hunting for any possible accomplices. And we're not sure how many there could be. You heard Catherine mention the number, perhaps a dozen. I mean, how many people it would have taken to coordinate this and make sure that this attack went off as planned. The reason they're putting the number at perhaps around 5 is because they're saying that some of the shooters are believed to have sprayed the restaurants with bullets and possibly grenades before they then went to the stadium to don a suicide vest there. And perhaps the same is true with respect to the concert hall, but we're trying to get the details now. Nonetheless, we are hearing from a few different sources now that the officials in Paris report that all of the attackers are believed dead, but they indeed must have had some accomplices to pull off something like this. And the question is, where are they, and how will they be detected, and how intricate are the links, and how organized was this? Did it come from Syria? Is ISIS in fact behind it? Are they getting more organized? What with this plane crash, the bombing of the plane that we saw, and now this? The former assistant director of the FBI is James Kallstrom. He's with us tonight by phone. James, thank you for being with us tonight. Your thoughts on what we've seen this evening in Paris?
Yeah, sure. My heart goes out to all the victims of these maniacs. Megan, you know me, and many like me that have fought to protect this country and protect our citizens and our families for years and years. I'm very, very concerned tonight of what I've seen here, Megan.
Why?
Well, it's not really anything new, but the fact that, number one, this so-called migrant stream into Europe, which is, I believe,